His enemies called him a butcher. The Pope called him the enemy of Christ. European kings spent years and fortunes trying to destroy him. They failed, every single time. But here is what they never taught you in school. When Saladin finally won when Jerusalem fell to his army after 88 years of Crusader occupation, he did not kill a single civilian, not one. He let his enemies leave safely. He paid for the poor ones who could not afford to go. The same man the Pope called a monster showed more mercy than any Christian king of his era. So here is the question that changes everything. Who was the real savage? The man defending his holy city, or the men who came from across the sea to take it? This is the story of Saladin, the man both sides of history got completely wrong, and why the truth is far more powerful than the legend. The world before Saladin. To understand Saladin, you need to understand the world he was born into, because it was a world on fire. The year was 1099. The First Crusade had just ended. The Crusaders had taken Jerusalem. And what they did inside that city, the history books still argue about how to describe. They killed thousands. Muslims, Jews, and even some Eastern Christians, all killed in the streets and the mosques and the synagogues of the Holy City. One Crusader chronicler wrote, and these are his words, not mine, that men waded through blood up to their ankles in the streets. That was the world Saladin was born into in 1137. A Muslim world that had been humiliated, a holy city that had been taken, and a region that had been divided for decades by Muslim rulers who spent more time fighting each other than the Crusaders who had settled on their land. Here is what nobody talks about. Saladin did not grow up wanting to be a warrior. He grew up wanting to be a scholar. He loved poetry. He loved Islamic theology. He was quiet, studious, and deeply religious. The man who would one day take Jerusalem was not born a soldier. He was made into one by a world that gave him no choice. The rise nobody expected. Saladin's rise to power was not what you would expect from history's greatest warrior king. He did not seize power through a coup. He did not murder his rivals. He did not inherit a throne. He earned it. Slowly. Painfully. In ways that confused everyone watching. In 1169, he was sent to Egypt as a military commander under his uncle. Egypt was weak, divided, and half-controlled by the Crusaders. When his uncle died, Saladin found himself in charge. And then he did something that nobody expected. He started giving things away. He reduced taxes on Egyptian farmers. He built hospitals. He established religious schools. He paid government workers on time. His advisors thought he was being weak. His enemies thought he was being naive. They were wrong. Saladin understood something that most rulers never learn, that loyalty built from generosity is stronger than loyalty built from fear. Within 4 years, Egypt went from a fractured, exhausted country to the most powerful state in the Muslim world. But Egypt was only the beginning. Because Saladin looked at the Muslim world around him, Syria, Mesopotamia, Arabia, all divided, all arguing, all ignoring the Crusaders sitting in their holy city, and he made a decision. He was going to unite them. Every single one of them, not by conquest, by persuasion, by outlasting his enemies, by being the last man standing when every other leader had given in to their own greed or fear. It took him 15 years. Nobody thought he could do it. He did it anyway. The Battle of Hattin, the Crusaders' last day. By 1187, Saladin had united the Muslim world. And he was ready. The Crusaders had made a catastrophic mistake. Their king, Guy of Lusignan, had been provoked by one of his own lords, a man named Reynald of Chatillon, who had attacked a Muslim caravan during a period of truce. A caravan that included Saladin's own sister. Saladin sent a message to the Crusader king: control your lord, or face the consequences. The king could not control Reynald. Saladin mobilized his entire army, 30,000 men. The largest Muslim force assembled in a generation, and he set a trap so elegant and so devastating that military historians still study it today. The Battle of Hattin, July 4th, 1187. Saladin knew that the Crusader army, 12,000 soldiers in full armor, could not survive without water in the July heat of the Jordan Valley. So he positioned himself between them and the only water source for miles. Then, he waited. The Crusader army marched toward him across waterless hills in July heat. Soldiers in full chainmail, horses dying of thirst, men so dehydrated they could barely hold their weapons. Saladin's cavalry harassed them constantly, striking from every direction, never committing to full battle, just enough to force them to keep moving, keep burning energy, keep dying of thirst. And then he set the grass on fire. The hills around the Crusader army began to burn, the smoke blowing directly into their faces, adding suffocation to thirst and exhaustion. By the time the Crusader army reached Hattin, the twin hills overlooking the Sea of Galilee, they had almost nothing left. Saladin struck. His cavalry hit from three sides simultaneously. The Crusader infantry, dehydrated and smoke-blinded, broke formation. The cavalry, without infantry support, were cut apart. The battle lasted less than 2 hours. Of 12,000 Crusader soldiers, almost none escaped. The king of Jerusalem was captured. The holiest relic of the Crusaders, the true cross, was taken. In one afternoon, 88 years of Crusader military power in the Holy Land was broken. Jerusalem was now within reach. The moment that defines him. On October 2nd, 1187, Saladin entered Jerusalem, the city that had been taken from the Muslim world 88 years earlier, the city where his predecessors had been massacred, the city that generations of Muslims had prayed toward and wept for. It was his. And here is the moment that defines everything about who Saladin actually was. His army expected blood. His advisors expected reprisals. The Christians inside the city expected the same fate the Crusaders had given the Muslims 88 years before. They did not receive it. Saladin ordered that not a single civilian be harmed. Every Christian who could pay a small ransom was allowed to leave. Those who could not pay, the poor, the elderly, the sick, Saladin paid their ransom himself, from his own treasury. When his own brother wanted to keep some of the Christians as slaves, Saladin refused. When wealthy Christian women came to him weeping for their husbands who had been captured, he released the husbands. The Christian historian who witnessed this wrote, and this is a Christian source, not a Muslim one, who could doubt that such goodness, friendship, and charity come from God. Here is the paradox that history cannot escape. The Muslims, whom the Crusades had been launched to destroy, showed more Christian mercy than the Christians themselves had shown. Saladin did not do this because it was strategic. He did it because he genuinely believed it was right. He was a man who lived by a code that most rulers only claim to have. The man behind the legend. Here is what nobody tells you about Saladin. After he took Jerusalem, after he unified the Muslim world, after he defeated every Crusader army sent against him, he was broke. He had given everything away. His treasury was empty. When he died in 1193, his estate contained 1 gold coin and 40 silver pieces. Not enough to pay for his own funeral. He had spent his entire reign giving money to the poor, paying soldiers, reducing taxes, building hospitals and schools. The most powerful man in the Muslim world died with almost nothing. His friend and biographer Baha ad-Din wrote this about him, and I want you to really hear these words. He had nothing set aside for himself, nothing beyond what was absolutely necessary for his soldiers. He cared nothing for money, nothing for buildings, nothing for any personal pleasure. He cared only about 2 things: the fight for what he believed was right, and the welfare of the people under his protection. Richard the Lionheart, his greatest enemy, the man who led the Third Crusade against him, who fought him for years, sent him gifts when Saladin was sick. They exchanged letters. Richard called him the greatest prince in the Islamic world. 2 men from 2 different civilizations who spent years trying to kill each other and ended up with a mutual respect that neither could fully explain. Saladin died on March 4, 1193. He was 55 years old. The Muslim world wept, and quietly, privately, some Crusaders did too. 800 years after his death, something remarkable happened. A survey was conducted asking Muslims, Christians, and secular historians from around the world to name the greatest leader of the medieval era. All three groups, independently, chose the same man. Not a king, not a conqueror, not a man who died rich and powerful. A man who died with one gold coin and a reputation that outlasted every empire that existed in his time. Saladin, the man his enemies called a monster. The man who turned out to be more human than almost anyone in the history of that brutal era. History is full of powerful men who conquered the world. Very few of them also managed to remain a decent human being while doing it. That is why we still say his name. If this story made you see history differently, share it with someone who only knows the Crusades from one side. Because every story has more than one side. And the truth is almost always more interesting than the version you were taught.